Well, it takes two to party, and like the DUP, the government's denying any deals were done over the 42-day detention vote. In our Westminster studio is the Secretary of State, Shaun Woodward. Mr. Woodward, it's a shame no one believes you or the DUP that no deals were done, isn't it?
Well, I think that's a matter for other people, and particularly the media, who keep telling people that one thing happened when it very clearly didn't. Both myself and Gregory have made absolutely clear that no deal was done. And I think what's very unfair about this is that it is effectively impugning the reputation of the DUP, who I think, whatever people's individual views about the party, there's no question that they have always taken an extremely strong and robust line in arguing for a framework of counter-terrorist legislation. And what we did was to share with them the security briefings on the kind of operations that are being organised against the United Kingdom at the moment, and they reached their own judgment. Now, the fact of the matter is there was no deal, there was no question of a deal, and it would have been quite wrong to have thought about a deal. Well,
surely not quite wrong. That's what politics is, isn't it, to a certain extent? You do what you have to do to achieve your desired end. I mean, there's talk of £200 million being loosened up in the water rates. There's talk of the purchase price of the army bases staying in Northern Ireland. None of that even mentioned?
No, terrorism is not about doing a deal. Terrorism and dealing with terrorism and dealing with those who would actually murder innocent women and children and men in our country is not about any kind of deal. It's about actually taking a principled stand on constructing a robust framework. And to borrow the words of a former DUP member, what you have to do is make sure there is no hope for the terrorist. And what mattered was that we constructed a framework of robust legislation. It doesn't surprise me that the DUP made the decision they did in supporting the government yesterday, because after all, the DUP have long taken a very clear line on these issues. But what is also significant,
but if it's such a clear line,
it wasn't only just the DUP.
If it was such a clear line,
the Ulster Unionists, Noel, voted as well with this.
Yeah.
And what you have to recognise here was we had two parties who've long argued for a robust framework, and they put the interests of actually protecting the public first on the table yesterday.
If it was such a robust and a clear line, why did they not make their position clear until after a very, very late meeting with Gordon Brown yesterday afternoon, just before the vote?
Well, they're perfectly entitled to seek briefings on security issues. We were very happy to make those briefings available to any member of Parliament, any group. You have to remember, Noel, that the Prime Minister actually set out initially to achieve a cross-party consensus. We would prefer yesterday to have had no vote at all on this issue, that there had actually been in the House a consensus. But the fact of the matter is that every single Chief Constable who has operational control today in dealing with terrorism was united in calling for these powers. And what happened with the DUP was that they recognised the strength of the arguments being made by those who have to conduct an investigation. And I think they were absolutely right to support the government yesterday.
Unlike your own party's MPs who had to be rung up by the Prime Minister, some of them said if they'd asked for 2 new bridges over the Thames, he'd have said yes. So desperate was he for support.
I can't help the caricature that seems to be falling around by those who regrettably perhaps wish we hadn't succeeded in passing the vote yesterday. What I can tell you is that the reason we took this position was that those who are investigating terrorist operations now in the United Kingdom already are at the ceiling of 28 days. They need more time. They've asked for more time. And that if we have the senior police officers and those responsible for protecting the public telling us that they need stronger powers, equally balanced by protections for the public at the same time so that we safeguard civil liberties, I believe that that balance that we struck, it is right to go forward and give the police the powers they are asking for. Because regrettably, as the Chief Constable of Northern Ireland, Sir Hugh Ward, said this week himself, it's not a question of if, but sadly it's a question of when we're going to need these powers. And what he rightly recognised is that it would be far better to debate them now before we need them than giving the terrorists the opportunity not only of some dreadful carnage in the future, but on a second day when we would actually have had to have declared a state of emergency to push through the powers. So I believe it was right that Parliament debated it. I regret those who, unfortunately, wouldn't support us yesterday.
I'm sorry, Secretary. I'll have to hurry you along because I don't want you to make a speech about the vote. But the DUP are saying today that they've proved they are crucial, and they will remind the government of that on each and every occasion, which will probably be more and more often. Do you agree that the DUP have certainly increased their power of leverage with Gordon Brown?
The Prime Minister has always considered the DUP a very important part of politics within the United Kingdom for a very simple reason. There are 9 members of Parliament elected from Northern Ireland from that party. But equally, let me be clear, Noel, you have to recognise that because there may only be one member elected from the Ulster Unionists at the moment, that doesn't mean that Sylvia Hermon should be put to the side. What was significant yesterday was that we saw both the Ulster Unionists and the DUP voting, and they were voting on a matter of principle.
Yeah, but they're going to use that support. They're going to use the fact that they supported you time and time again, they say, on every occasion where it is possible to use it. So they have increased their leverage.
Well, I think you will find that the DUP have actually been making a rather strong case, whether it's on dealing with counter-terrorism or whether it's been dealing on any matter in Northern Ireland for an extremely long time. I've always respected them when I was there as the junior minister.
I'm sorry, Secretary, it's not just on terror issues,
I'm not
on all
prepared
sorts
to
of
recognise
issues.
your argument.
On all sorts of issues. Well, you'll have to recognise it or satisfy them that you.
Well, as
why
I say
not?
to you,
because
I've
they're
always
saying
taken them seriously. I
crucial.
don't take them more seriously because of yesterday.
They say they're crucial now, not important, crucial.
They've always been crucial. It's absolutely essential in Northern Ireland that as we go forward with devolution, that we continue to pay due respect both to the DUP, Sinn Féin and all the parties, because actually in a democracy you should respect all the political parties that have been elected by the communities.
In an atmosphere where Republicans are already believing that the DUP is getting it all their own way in the Assembly, does this increased leverage that the DUP now believe they have serve further to upset the delicate balance of power?
I intend to apply exactly the same parity that I have done in the last year, tomorrow and the next week and the next week. It's perfectly clear how we go forward in Northern Ireland. What we've actually seen in the last year is a power-sharing democracy in action. We've seen an Assembly return politicians elected in Northern Ireland able to make decisions about people's lives. We've seen an executive, again power-sharing, working through very difficult issues. And of course, Rome wasn't built in a day, but the fact of the matter is a huge start has been made in Northern Ireland in the last year, and I think the politicians are doing a good job.
It nearly fell down last week because of the Sinn Féin's threat not to nominate the Deputy First Minister, which would have meant the whole thing possibly collapsing within a week. So it's not exactly built on very sure foundations, and I'm just asking you if the DUP's weight with the government now further upsets that balance.
Well, I don't accept the premise of your argument. It didn't nearly fall down last week. What happened last week is that the parties came together to discuss issues which, to use the words of Peter Robinson, required urgent attention. That was felt by Sinn Féin, it was felt by the DUP. Now, what's interesting about last week, and again, far be it from me to disagree with you, Noel, but I think it's a bit of a caricature. What actually happened last week was that the parties didn't walk away from each other. They emerged at the end of last week not only nominating, but actually they started the following day to address those issues which both parties regarded as urgent, and they've started to work through a framework and a process together to actually resolve those issues. I think that's a tremendous achievement, and I think people in Northern Ireland welcome that.
Just one last question, Secretary of State. Iris Robinson's got into a lot of trouble this week for condemning homosexuality as an abomination. I know that you have campaigned very strongly on equal-sex marriages and indeed on allowing equal-sex relationships to adopt children. What do you think of Iris Robinson's remarks?
Well, my position on equality issues is well known, and I've argued for it across the board, regardless of whether it's to do with gender, whether it's to do with race, whether it's to do with sexuality or, for example, age. The fact of the matter is we have a firm body of law established which firmly puts out there the fundamental principles of equality. And all of us in public office have a duty to uphold the law.
Is it helpful when MPs and MLAs make such comments?
Well, we live in a democracy in which people are allowed to express their own personal opinions, but in public office we have a duty to uphold the law, as indeed every citizen does, and the law is very clear on equality.
Secretary of State, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.